full disclosure, when I started, I thought, oh, well, I know 20 law firms. If I can get all 20 law firms to buy this software, then I'll have a business. Turns out, building a software business and running a software business is way more expensive than running a consulting business. So,
good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening, and welcome to Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, Digital Media Manager here at 43 North. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast with Adrian Dayton from Clearview Social. But before we jump into this week's episode, I just want to announce that on Wednesday, April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m., here at the 43 North Incubator, 640 Ellicott Street, downtown Buffalo, we have another edition of Latitude Live, our live podcast, live recording with an audience, questions and answers, a little food, a little drink, and great conversation. This month, we're featuring Andrew Martinko from SunCare, 2017 43 North winner. What is SunCare? How can SunCare help you stay safe in the sun this summer? These are great questions, but you have to join us on Wednesday, April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m., So how do you do that? Head on over to 43north.org, our social media channels, or head on over to Eventbrite and search 43 North and register. It's free, and we'd be thrilled to have as many people here as possible. We want the fire marshal to shut us down. We don't want that, but it would be nice to have a packed house. We had about 50 people here last time. It was a great episode. You can listen to that episode in the Latitude archive. So this week on the podcast, we have Adrian Dayton from Clearview Social. Adrian's a former lawyer. So what led Adrian from giving up his career as a lawyer in a courtroom every day to the startup grind? Well, let's jump right into this week's episode so Adrian can tell his startup story. Adrian, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. How you doing?
doing great. Thanks for having me.
As we start out every episode, for those who don't know you, give us the quick pitch of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Adrian Dayton. I'm the founder of Clearview Social. And Clearview Social is, I guess they call it employee advocacy software. So it's a product that makes it easy for organizations to send email prompts to their employees, so the employees share that content to their individual social networks.
Every company is its own media outlet these days, right?
That's right. And any company can deputize their employees to start sharing the good stuff from their company using Clearview Social.
But let's backtrack a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background before Clearview.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually came out to Buffalo for law school because my father had taken a job at Kaleida Health as the chief of surgery some years back.
So where are you from originally?
Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Yeah, and so my parents said, well, why don't you come check out, Buffalo's law school? Full disclosure, I didn't know they had a law school. I'm not from this area. But I said, okay, really just to appease my parents more than anything else.
Sure.
So I came out of the school and I visited some other law schools in Ohio and Michigan while I was out here. And I just loved it. I mean, it also didn't hurt that I got in-state tuition and scholarship money, but it just seemed like a great environment. And so I did law school, graduated, got a great job at one of the top firms in town at the time, Jekyll, Fleischman & Muegel. And in 2008, just really a fantastic year to start practicing law.
Yeah.
And so then early 2009, I discovered social media. Actually brought my first client into the firm through social media. And then one day the head of my department came into my office and he shared with me a few words I'll never forget. He said, "You're fired." And I called my wife and she's crying because we have a baby at home. And I said, "Honey, it's okay. I've got an idea. I'm going to start a business teaching lawyers how to use Twitter."
Okay.
And she just cried harder. But no, she was very supportive.
You're like, "Sure, honey."
Yeah. She was supportive. And over the next few months, I wrote the first book on social media for lawyers. And I just kind of decided to focus on that niche. And as social exploded, I really became the most in-demand speaker on social media in the whole legal industry. I was able to travel all over the world, spoken in 9 different countries to over 15,000 professionals now. And then after a few years of that, I started to get really frustrated because all these professionals, they loved the idea of social media. And they'd come and hear me speak and they would love it. And that was a great talk. Thank you so much. You've inspired us.
And then did nothing.
And then did
with
nothing.
The
That's right. That's right. And I was like, am I just a glorified entertainer here? And I mean, the money was great, but I just felt like there was more I could do to impact these organizations. And so just over 4 years ago, I learned about Z80 and what Jordan Levy and Ron Schreiber had built to help entrepreneurs. And I had thought about just kind of bootstrapping and self-funding my business. But then Dan Maniszewski, who used to be the head of Z80, told me about the program where they could get matching funds through the state as long as you joined a qualifying incubator, which Z80 was one of those. So I joined the incubator through a friends and family round. They matched the money. We raised about $400,000 and hired our first 2 employees there in the Z80 when it was at the Buffalo News Building, and kind of off we went.
So lecture circuit, you could have been fine doing that. It might not have been as rewarding as you wanted to. Why join the startup grind? Yeah,
so I think there's really two parts of motivation behind it. First, as a speaker, I felt like my personal development had kind of hit a plateau, and I wanted to do something more meaningful with my life. But second off, which is really kind of a financial one, is, I left consulting when it was, and my speaking at its very peak, but I saw the writing on the wall that as firms brought their own social media people in-house, long term it might not be as lucrative to be speaking on that. And so I wanted to figure out a way to build something that eventually I could scale and that I could eventually sell, right? Because if you are what do they call it? If you are the guru, right? If the guru dies or the guru stops working, the money stops,
right?
And so I wanted to build something that was bigger than me. And also, since I was a kid, I've always wanted to build a business, and entrepreneurship's always really appealed to me. So
there's some humorous limerick I heard not too long ago. The 2018 crypto guru is the 2013 social media guru, which those gurus just graduated on and on. So I certainly understand that. So putting your money where your mouth is, it's like, okay, I want to build something that's meaningful. What was the nexus of Clearview Social? Obviously, you had this idea. How did the idea come about? And talk a little bit about just those early days.
Yeah, good point. Good question. So when we first started, we actually started with a different idea.
Okay.
So the name Clearview Social, the term view refers to a big dashboard that we were building that would bring in input from all the different areas that marketing team need to kind of see how their content is performing. So analytics from social, analytics from on-page Google Analytics, analytics from other legal third-party distributors, which you probably haven't heard of, like JD Supra and Mondac and Lexology, and kind of having one place where you could have a clear view of everything that was going on with your social and digital presence.
All the numbers.
Yeah. And honestly, I still think that concept is a great one, but the market wasn't ready for it. So we created kind of a mock-up of this and our first version, and we had a few customers that said, yeah, we'll buy this.
But there's only so many data nerds out there who could really
benefit from all that data.
Yeah, like
the firms weren't nerdy enough for
right.
that, right? Like I was plenty nerdy for it. And it would help them make much better decisions. But what I realized is at a very fundamental level, the problem wasn't as much data. The bigger problem was overall lack of participation. 95% of the employees within these massive firms, these are amazing lawyers, many of them billing $1,200, $1,300 an hour for their work, and none of them are sharing, none of them are participating in their individual social networks in a way that could really, impact the firm in a positive way.
Because it's too hard, right? It's too hard to get bogged down in all that things.
Yeah, and
who wants to write a LinkedIn article and things like that?
Yeah,
right?
and copying and pasting a link and hitting share.
It's just so hard.
Like that's not hard. Yeah. It just comes down to priorities.
Yeah. Exactly.
And when it came around to it, the vast majority, they just never got around to getting to social media. So what I figured out is if we could reduce the friction of that experience, if we could make it, instead of taking 5 minutes, have it take 20 seconds, then we could dramatically increase the number of people participating. And we've seen that. It's been pretty exceptional. We've gone from organizations on average having 3 or 4% of their people sharing ever to 25 to 50% participating.
Wow.
And so we're seeing behavior change, and the change in behavior has a massive impact because when one person shares, that doesn't mean that one more person is seeing the content. It means hundreds of more people are seeing it. So that's been really cool to see.
So you guys started out of the gate. I guess before I jump to that question, so what does in 2018 Clearview Social do? What is the service?
Yeah. So what Clearview Social does is, I think the best explanation is we help firms, and we start out in law firms, but now we're in law firms, accounting firms, recruiting firms. A few publishers have purchased the product. Monroe Muffler is now using this in multiple offices, and they're really any organization where content or ideas can be used to sell their product, which I think is a pretty large group.
Yeah.
Clearview Social can help them turn their employees into a platform to help share that message out.
So certainly you started kind of in your wheelhouse, directly targeting law firms, right?
Sure.
What was that? Obviously, that was a deliberate attempt to try to bring those firms into the now 21st century, right?
Yeah. Full disclosure, when I started, I thought, oh, well, I know 20 law firms. If I can get all 20 law firms to buy this software, then I'll have a business. Mm-hmm. Turns out, building a software business and running a software business is way more expensive than running a consulting business. So I now have 145 clients, and we have over 20,000 users. And every time we add another 1,000 users or we add another 50 firms, there's like an order of magnitude increase in the complexity and the challenges that we face. Mm-hmm. And so we've had to grow our team. And so we're pretty close to break even. We're not burning a lot of money anymore, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge to grow and grow larger.
So you started with those first 2 employees after you joined Z80. How much have you guys grown since then?
Yeah, so currently we have 13 employees. Wow. And we have 2 salespeople that are on the West Coast, 2 salespeople here in this office, and we have 1 UX UI designer who is in Raleigh, but everyone else is here locally in Buffalo.
That's great. So how is expansion? You worked in law firms, of all sizes. Expansion is always tricky. So how is the growth of the business? What decisions need to be made? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that's unique about our business is we have absolutely nailed a niche, and that has helped us give us an advantage over our competitors in the legal space and in the accounting space because we know our customers so well.
Are there a lot of other competitors, not to interrupt, in the legal space, like doing the same thing you're doing?
So the answer to that question is, are there other competitors? Yes, there are some other large, very well capitalized competitors, but they're not specific to the legal space or accounting space. So they don't have the same industry perspective that we do. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. So in one sense, we have this huge advantage in the accounting and legal space, but our big challenge is that those markets are not that large. Right? So you look at ACV Auctions, and they started in the office right next to us a few months after we launched our company, and we never had any takers for VC money or people wanting to give us big infusions of capital because there was not kind of a story where we grow to a $100 million company. Mm-hmm. So in terms of growth, it's been a little bit more of a challenge to attract money, a little bit more of a challenge to grow more quickly just because the size of the market is smaller. But what we've started to do is add additional product offerings. So our second product is going to be launching next month. We're really excited about it. It's called Post Haste, and it lets professionals take news stories or anything that's been written about, and they can very quickly highlight a section of some other article, hit a button in their browser, and it will turn it into a new blog post, suggest a Shutterstock image we have rights to, suggest a headline. They add a few paragraphs of their own insight, and they can submit a blog post, in just a few minutes, whereas most of them are taking an hour or 2 right now to create those types of things. So that comes out next month. We're really excited about it. It's called Post Haste.
I'm actually quite excited to hear about something like that, to be honest.
Yeah. Honestly, it's going to be great. And honestly, it's also a product that has a broad appeal. I mean, it could work for any I guess SMB is the word they use in the startup world, but it could be used for any professional, any company that wants to kind of use their thought leadership or their insights on what's happening in the world to gain more attention.
So is that part of kind of the newer strategy, is new products for outside law industry, or is this still geared towards law industry that other organizations could possibly use?
Yeah, so they use a term called share of wallet in like banking and other industries, right? Like how many products can you get? What share of the wallet can you get that they're using at your company? And so currently the average law firm or the average customer we have is spending about $10,000 a year on Clearview. We have some very large enterprises that are spending $60,000 or $70,000 a year on the product. But by having a second product, we think a large percentage of our existing customers will buy it. And if it so happens that people love it outside the space, that's great as well. I feel like every product you launch, every startup you launch, it's kind of like taking a swing, and sometimes you hit and sometimes you miss. And with Clearview Social, we definitely have a solid like single or a double, and if we can keep coming out with good products, I feel like we still could, sneakily find our way to get to a $100 million valuation. It's just not going to be the customary way, with VCs that other people have gone about that growth.
Every startup's different. They all get to the end point in a different way.
That's right.
From what I understand.
That's right. And for some, the end point is going out of business, and for some, it is growing very large. But
we certainly don't want that.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like we're past this point where we have a successful company, and if we wanted to tighten the belt and be profitable, we could absolutely do that. But we're growing so quickly that we're being very aggressive in our strategy.
So how do you measure success? Because just like getting to that end point for a startup, good or bad. Can be different ways. I think success is always measured in different ways. You talk to a VC out in California, success is $100 million raise to $1 billion valuation or something like that.
Yeah.
How do you define success for Clearview Social?
Well, that's a great question. I think that the nice thing about building a company is that there already exists a common language and a common kind of strategy and hierarchy around what makes a business successful. And it really comes down to building a culture and processes that, independent of any individual, is successful, right? So if we have a product, we have great customers, we have a great culture, and we have a system that we've built that no longer has to have Adrian Dayton pulling every lever, that can grow and be successful without me, that's success. So in a sense, it's like, me creating something that no longer needs me but still is valuable, that for me would be success. I guess it's kind of like an immortality in a way, right? Something that can live on.
Yeah, the kids are growing up, and they don't need all the guidance from dad anymore.
Yeah,
right?
So for me, that's what success looks like for Clearview, and I don't have like a number in mind. Like, I certainly don't need this to be a $50 million or $100 million company, but I want it to be something meaningful that's having an impact. That's more than just me. So it's a very different question than what does success look like for me in life. But I think, this business is certainly one of the most important things in my life for sure.
As a startup founder, what keeps you up at night?
Just always the same thing. It's growth. It's just, how can we grow faster? I mean, I think about these companies that grow at like 5 to 10% a year, like, wow, that's got to be nice to have the luxury to just have a nice conservative slow growth rate. But for us, I mean, if we don't hit a growth rate between 80 and 100% a year, we just can't survive because we're just too heavily invested in growth. And so, growth it's just absolutely growth. And for 4 years, like, you could have asked me every month for the last 4 years, and it's been, how do I get this thing to grow faster?
Were there nights where, it's March 1st, 2015, you're like, I don't know if we're going to make it to March 30th. Like, oh my God, I'm like, what have I done? My wife's going to be pissed again.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So sometimes I'll get really stressed, and my wife will see I'm really stressed, and she'll finally kind of break down and say to me, like, honey, are we going to be okay?
Good?
Like, is the company okay? Are we going to survive? And I've been really lucky in the 4 years we've been building the business. We've definitely had ups and downs.
Yeah.
And it is a roller coaster. It is an emotional roller coaster. It is a financial roller coaster. And I did have a moment in the last few months where I had to personally write a check to make payroll for the company. But that's not the same desperation as like you have to write a check to make payroll and you don't have any money left, right? So we haven't hit that point yet, fortunately. And I don't know, like I hear these stories about like Tony Hsieh, who started Zappos, or other great entrepreneurs, and they all had this moment where they were out of everything and they'd leveraged their last property and they had done their last thing, and then it clicks and they take off, right? So I haven't been at those depths, but also we haven't hit. I feel like we also haven't hit our kind of tipping point where we can really start to grow quickly yet either. So we're still searching for it.
Like you said, you're coming out with a new product next month. From an innovation standpoint, there's so many companies out there, promising organizations, 20, 30%, click rates and, better analytics and all this stuff. So how do you continuously innovate in a space that's so noisy?
Yeah. So actually the answer to that question, I think is it all comes down to simplicity, right? You think about, have you used Uber since it arrived in Buffalo?
Yep.
You think of the user experience with Uber is just, it's just sensational. You open up your phone, you click a button, and all the work's done for you, right? This company has found someone to drive a car to exactly where you are, pick you up, take you someplace, and you don't even have to ever pull out your wallet. The whole process is simplified. And so what we've realized at Clearview Social is, and what we've seen in the example from other companies is, if you can create a product that helps people solve their problems simpler, right, or with fewer steps, and that kind of takes away steps from their life as opposed to adding more things, you'll always have success. It's not about who has the best bells and whistles, it's who delivers the best experience. And I feel like that's something that we can do even if we have less money, even if we have fewer resources than other companies.
What's the feedback been from law firms and maybe organizations that aren't in the law field, legal field, who are also using the product?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like law firms and accounting firms, they love the product because they feel the pain most acutely of people not sharing. And also, they already have thought leadership, right? They're already creating the content, but nobody will share it. So with organizations outside of legal and accounting, it's a little bit more mixed. And honestly, we don't have quite the same retention outside of legal because either they don't create content, they don't understand the value of it, so they don't create it, or they don't understand the value of getting their employees sharing that content. So for example, we had one smaller recruiting firm in town, and they used our software for 6 months, and their numbers were off the charts. They had tons of people sharing, they were getting tons of traffic, but they didn't know how to value that. They didn't know what that meant to them. And so I think that's partly why we haven't been able to branch out of, we've had most of our success in these two industries because we just really get where their pain is and are able to solve that problem.
Well, I think that's the big conundrum with any type of content, because like I look at this podcast, for example, I'm not making millions yet on this podcast, but it's part of the overall service, I think, of telling the 43 North, the Buffalo, and startup story. So it's like that's the greater value, is like sharing these stories. What is the value of that? It might be hard to quantify now, but we had winners from 2017 who heard one of the first episodes of this podcast and then applied.
That's awesome.
So it's like, okay, well then they're now in Buffalo. That's good.
Yeah. So to that point, what it really comes down to is, so I studied economics in college. My degree's in economics, and economists always look at expected values. And so with expected values, right, if something has, it's only going to hit 1 out of every 10 tries, then with 100 tries you're going to get 10 hits. And with marketing, there's also expected values, but with expected values, the math is sometimes hard. And so if people can't wrap their heads around the math, then sometimes they just refuse to do it. So look, I don't see how writing this one article is going to bring me a new client. Well, that's it. It's just like that new article is not going to do it, but your 6th article might bring you 5 new clients. Yeah. That's right. And I've been able to see that, right? I've also written 100 articles, and I've given 200 talks in the last 6 years, or last 8 years, sorry. and when it hits, it's pretty amazing. I mean, there's this. I like this principle of serendipity, and serendipity has nothing to do with fate. Serendipity means a fortunate accident, and social media is all about putting yourself in a place and in an environment where these fortunate accidents will happen more often. And I see it all the time for me, and also for my clients. And my big vision is that I'm going to facilitate those kind of chance collisions happening more often for people.
All right, wrapping things up. If people want to learn more about Clearview Social, want to learn more about what you do, how can they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to clearviewsocial.com, or they can follow me at Adrian Dayton on Twitter, or send me an email, adrian@clearviewsocial.com. So thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
And you guys have a great blog over there, great marketing tips on there that I regularly check out.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Make sure you guys check that out as well. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll
Really enjoyed it.
catch up with you down the road.
Sounds good.
Cheers. I want to thank Adrian for joining us on the podcast. If you want to learn more about Clearview Social, just head on over to their website, clearviewsocial.com. They do offer demos, so if this product sounds interesting for you or your startup or your business or your practice, make sure you contact their sales team so you can get a demo of Clearview Social's amazing product. And one last reminder on this episode of the podcast, April 25th, Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m., it's Latitude Live one more time. Well, not one more time. We're going to do this, spoiler alert, every month. But Wednesday, April 25th, 6 to 8 p.m. Andrew Martinko from SunCare, 2017 43 North winner, is joining us on the live edition of the podcast. SunCare is a fantastic startup using nanotechnology to make sure your skin stays safe in the summer sun. And that's just enough of a tease to get you interested. Head on over to 43north.org, head on over to our social media channels, or head on over to Eventbrite and search 43 North and register for this free event on April 25th. I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'm Nate Benson for 43 North. We'll see you at the next one.